Hi YouTube, Brittini here. So in today's video, I wanted to talk to you about the past, the present, and the future. Now I brought this up in another video, but I wanted to further elaborate on it because I do think it's a really important concept to understand, and that can really help you if you are living paycheck to paycheck, and how to explain how to get out of it. And it'll also show you what the wealthy do with their money so that you could follow the steps on how to get wealthy. So the concept, the past, the present, and the future. It's hard to write when I'm doing this. I'm going to split it into two. So people who are living paycheck to paycheck, it could be they have student loans, they have debts that they accumulated, so some of their money is going to have to go to the past. And the power of compounding, depending on the interest rates that you have on your money, it's going to mean that your money and your wealth is being compounded against you. So think of the rule of 72. If your student loans are not federally backed, it could be that they're really high interest rate. For some people, credit card debt is well into the 20s. So I've used the example before of a 24% interest rate. You take that 24, you divide it into 72, and in 3 years, your money that you pay will double, assuming you didn't even make any payments. But over time, that 3 years, then 6 years, then and so on. So if the debt is not paid off, then the principal balance will have doubled in 3 years' time. So that's, you're spending money in the present day, and a lot of your money is sinking to pay for the past. So you're constantly feeling like you have to go and earn a paycheck because you're spending it today, but you're servicing debt that you accumulated in the past. And so this cycle continues for people who are living paycheck to paycheck. And it could be that some people are just not earning enough and they don't have any money in the past. And in their case, they would just be spending it up here if they have not accumulated debt, if they're starting out in life. Now, people who have figured out how to get out of debt are originally they're spending their money in the present. And they may have paid the debt, and while they're paying the debt, they also had money compounding against them. But then eventually the debt was paid off. And so they now can put some of their money towards the future. They can start investing in their retirement, or maybe they were investing all along, which is what I always advise, because it's really important to build that savings muscle. So even while you're paying down debt, it's good to start investing into the future, because what will happen is, let's just say you're not going to get that same 24%. Maybe you'll get it in 1 year, but you're not going to get it consistently in year in and year out. And that's how banks make their money. They're charging people an interest rate that is so above the prime interest rate of what banks are charged. So therefore, they're making guaranteed money on the money that they lend out. So, but if you are investing your money, let's say you're putting it in the stock market, in an index fund, and that index fund over time is a consistent rate of return of 10%. You take that rule of 72, you divide the 10 into it, and in 7.2 years, your principal balance will have doubled because of the contributions, the interest upon the interest earning you money, as well as additional contributions will contribute to the fact of you even earning more than that, because you're continually spending money in the present, but you're also spending money for your future in the form of investing, in the form of saving and putting it somewhere that could grow your wealth. Now, as you're doing this, you don't want to take all the same risk on your money, because some of the money might be into speculative. So for instance, if you are someone who's investing in Bitcoin, you may not want to put all your money because it's a speculative investment. It could go to zero. So definitely do not advise doing something like that. And then there are people like Jamie Dimon who will tell you that it is not even a currency. But I'm not here to tell you whether it will or will not one day be a currency. But I'm only suggesting that you do not put all your eggs in something that is speculative. That no more than 5 to 10%. If you have a lot more money, you can afford to take a little bit more risk. But if you don't, it's probably wiser to keep the amount that you invest in something that is speculative as a small amount, and continue to invest and put your money in savings to grow for you as you're spending your money in more like index funds, maybe investing in something that could, an asset that could grow in value for you over time. So again, getting back to how people are spending their money. If they're spending their money and it is being compounded against them, what ends up happening is the debt will end up growing. And because the debt ends up growing, the individual that is living paycheck to paycheck will constantly feel the need that they have to earn a paycheck. And what ends up happening is the debt will grow substantially. And then even some of their future income is then therefore being spent in the past. So they already have money that they have to make in the future just to be able to service the debt. Where so as the person who's growing wealth, their money that is being accumulated for them and compounding for them in the future will one day replace the paycheck. So they will not need to earn a paycheck eventually as this money accumulates. And even as this person is working, you're going to see things that they have done in the past. Maybe initially they started out and to find the money to be able to put money for their future, to be able to invest in their 401k. They had to really cut back. In the beginning, you kind of have to find the means to be able to invest. And that could be that you're doing more things for yourself around the house. Maybe you're cutting your own grass, you're doing your own laundry. But over time, some of the things that you did in the past, as your wealth starts to grow, the ways that you were so completely frugal can start to disappear. You could spend more money in the present, and then you don't have to spend as much into the future, because what ends up happening is you could spend a little bit more in your present because your future is growing for you. And even though you might maintain a consistent savings rate, let's say you got a savings rate, you got your savings rate to something like 20%, and eventually your compounding grew another 20% for you. So now you have a savings rate of 40%. That 40% can start to take a life of its own, that you could spend a little bit more down here, and maybe you're not doing your own laundry. Maybe you're going and spending a little bit more on conveniences for yourself, and you're not having to work as hard. Maybe you can give up a second job if you were working a second job. So people who are growing wealth can eventually, at some point, because their money is growing for them, can change and build lifestyle improvements into their plan. So they don't necessarily have to be as frugal as they were when they were starting out. Whereas someone who is here, they start to feel like all they could do is be frugal, because there's so much of their money is going towards the past that they feel like, the price of eggs just went up to, $8 and change. That takes them, and makes them feel very uncomfortable, because so much of their money is being spent to service debt. Maybe they have the high student loan debt as we were talking about. So they have to earn and continuously stay on the perpetual treadmill of earning a paycheck, because if they stopped working, the debt would continue to accumulate, and they'd have late payments, over limit fees. So it can continue to grow and grow regardless. So if someone's not working, their situation is starting to become worse. And so even some of their present income is not enough to sustain the debt that they accumulated in the past. Now, how to get out of this? To get out of this cycle, you're going to have to do something radical. Some people have done radical things, and maybe you're not at that step where you're willing to make some radical changes. But some people have literally moved into their car. Some people have downsized. Some people have gotten second jobs. There's no one tried and true method for what you need to do, but you have to try to cut down your expenses, comb through everything that you're spending so that you could find money so that you're not servicing, that you're starting to pay down this debt. If you start to pay it down, and the other thing you want to do is you also want to, no matter what, save a little bit towards your future, regardless that you're paying down debt. It is the worst thing you could do is go into retirement with not having a single penny saved for yourself into the future. So even if you're carrying debt into retirement, it's okay because eventually Social Security will replace some of this income. And then at least some of this other income that you've been saving might then eventually help you pay down. And this will trickle down to here so that some of your Social Security income will help you live life up here. But if you're not saving, you're not going to get yourself into that situation. But if you're young enough and you're able to, start to adopt frugality in your life, start to really watch on the cost of items, know your pricing, make sure you're using all the food in your home, listen to frugality channels that will help you come up with ideas on, potentially keeping things longer, using what you have already in your home. The average home has 300,000 items. So the reality is you probably do not need to buy any more things. And it may mean that you need to cut your shopping habit in general. And what ends up happening is people who get it, people who realize what they're doing is not helping them and it's not servicing them, and they're going to be continually in this cycle of debt, what they end up doing is they really do find ways, and that they have a wake-up call of some kind. Maybe they lose a job, or maybe they realize how much of the debt is happening. But something happens that they realize that they want to make changes, and they become super hyper-focused, as Dave Ramsey will say, focused intensity, or gazelle intense is I think the words he uses, that they pay down their debt. They use very little to live and they keep their expenses low, and they're attacking the debt. So you've seen people pay a couple $100,000 in student loans in a few years, and that's because they're selling their stuff, they're getting a second job, they're using their income whatever they can, and they're living on their means. Maybe they rent a room in their house out. Maybe they rent out their car on one of those websites where you can. Maybe they turn around and rent out a space in their garage. They do anything that they can to start to make additional income so that they're paying down the debt, and they start focusing on what the wealthy do. Now the wealthy, they're still living their life, and their money is growing and compounding until they get to a point where it completely gets to a point where it can sustain their life without them having the need to work, where the savings rate grows to be over 100%. So anything 100% or more, that to substantiate the income that they are using to live their life, they're what's considered financially independent. And this money trickles down here, and eventually they could step off the treadmill of having to earn a paycheck, and their money is now being spent down here. In some cases, a year or two before they retire, they get focused intensity again as far as frugality comes back into their lives. They start watching their budgets a lot more. So this is the step I'm at, where I'm realizing I'm at the final stretch of my years of working. And so I'm really become a little bit more intense in this last year of trying to watch our spending so that I can continue to add a little bit more up here. And I also am now having, adding into savings that I'm not using for today. It's really for today, but it's a budget here and it's part of the future. But it's going to cover me for the first few years until Social Security comes in and replaces some of my income. So then some of the compounding is going to trickle down here. Social Security will come down here. Some of the money I use in here will cover some years, and I'll be able to support and live my life without the need of having to earn a paycheck. Whereas the person here, they have to continue working until eventually they get to the point where it's really, really a struggle just living in the present day, because their future money is being spoken for because the debt accumulated to such a high degree that they're paying it. So to get out of this cycle, focus on what this person did here. Try to reduce your costs as much as you can. While you're spending in the present, you're paying down your past, you're cutting down debts, you're starting to save into your future so that you have some pot of money growing for you that could compound in the positive end for you. So maybe you're not paying 24% on your money, but even a little bit will make a difference in the long term, because focused intensity all on paying for debt but not building the savings muscle is not really the smartest thing to do. because what ends up happening is you miss the power of time compounding on your side. What ends up happening here is the more time you have, the more your money doubles and then doubles. So that 10% return that you get every 7.2 years, your money doubles. Then the next 7.2 years, your money doubles. And the next 7.2 years, your money doubles. So that what ends up happening, even the little bit you put in here, while granted, you may have 24% down here, because you're focused on that as well, a lot of your money is going, and if you're not accumulating new debt, you'll be surprised how quickly that gets paid off too, especially as you start to see what the wealth side growing for you, as you start to see that you built up a little emergency fund in here, because you have to have a little bit of emergency fund before you can continue to invest up here. Should have mentioned that prior. But if, as long as you have a little bit of money to fall back on in here, in case the car breaks down or something happens, then you can start to focus up here and continue to focus down here. So cut your living expenses as much as you can. Maybe get a roommate, house hack if you can. Do anything that you can do. Learn from other people, and not one size does not fit all. So what I did, and me getting rid of a second car and us becoming a one-car household may not work for you, but that could be something that works. And you're cutting your insurance. You no longer need insurance on 2 cars. You no longer need to get maintenance on 2 cars, or having to have replacement costs on 2 cars. And maybe you're doing other things. Maybe, in my case, I had roommates for much of my life until I hit the age of 30. And then when my husband and I moved in together, for maybe a few years, I lived by myself. And those years were hard. And eventually, again, when we got married, we're living together. So that cut down cost as well. Do what you can, not one size fits all on how to pay down the debt, but the more you can absorb, when you're ready to make that step to start doing the things that you need to do to get yourself into this stage where you're not spending your money on the past. What ends up happening is, when I buy a car, I buy it in the present. When I'm doing improvements on my home, I'm buying in the present. I have not paid a single penny in interest rate on a credit card since it probably was 2005 or 2004, 2005, once I paid my credit card debt off. And that's what happens as people start to get out of debt. They realize that, wow, I want that money working for me versus then against me. And they focus on paying this down. So, and while they're saving, so the power of compounding can work on their side, so that eventually get to the point where they find themselves no longer living in their past, no longer having their future service the past, and now it may take a little bit longer. They may not accumulate as much wealth, but they are now in a place of financial security where they're not using their present to pay for their past, their future to pay for their past. They can at one point in time step off the treadmill of having to earn a paycheck, because they focused and changed their money around to have the future be paying for the present day. I hope that's helpful in that analogy. Do what you can when you're ready to make those kind of steps. There's a lot of content on this channel. There's a lot of content on so many other channels that you can use to find ways to be frugal, to find the money to pay down the debt, so that you don't feel financially strapped, that you don't feel that life is hitting you hard with the cost of living going up so exponentially high. Maybe you just find solutions for yourself where you move a little bit further away. You have to have a little bit further of a commute just to reduce the cost of your rent, and maybe that will also reduce the cost of your groceries. I know that had I chosen to live in New York City as opposed to Brooklyn, the cost of goods would have been so much higher. Not saying that they're cheap in Brooklyn, because they're not, but the difference between the amount of rent that a grocery store pays to be, in New York City as opposed to being in Brooklyn makes a difference, and that has to be passed on to the consumer. So all of everything that you do is passed on to you in one form or another. And so try to move away from using your present and your future to pay for your past, and have your present day. You start saving money towards your future, start investing in your retirement, start figuring out ways where your money could work for you and work hard for you so you don't have to. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Any comments that you have, please hit me up. And thanks for tuning in. Hit like and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Thanks.